The Pittsburgh Steelers have signed running back Xazavian Vallaway off of waivers from the Houston Texans. Vallaway was a second-team All-Pac-12 running back with the Arizona State Sun Devils last year, and he was picked up by the Houston Texans as an undrafted free agent. Actually played pretty darn well in their Week 1 preseason matchup. Our Texans host Jeremy Chuggs here at Chat Sports says he actually has been doing pretty darn well in camp, but he was waived, and Omar and Mike Tomlin saw that kind of talent, the kind of athleticism that Vallaway has, and they decided to sign him to this team. Now, they did have 90 people on the roster already, so he did have to cut somebody, and that cut casualty here, that roster casualty, is going to be running back John Lovett, who was signed just a couple of days ago. He's now released. He's now gone from the team, and now you're replacing him with Xazavian Vallaway. Now, I know the spelling of his name is a little bit weird. It looks like Xazavian, but it's actually Xazavian Vallaway. Actually played pretty darn well last week in the first week of the preseason with the Houston Texans, and I think that he's going to slide in there along with Darius Hagans as a potential running back for here during the preseason. Super excited to see him play in the black and gold here in week 2 of the preseason. Now, on today's video, I'm also going to be breaking down 8 players whose stock is rising on the Pittsburgh Steelers here in training camp, and then I also have 3 players whose stock is starting to fall a little bit. But before I get into today's Pittsburgh Steelers training camp stock watch, go ahead and let me know in the comments section which Steelers player has impressed you the most in camp to this point. Has it been Kenny Pickett? Has it been George Pickens? Who's that player for you that has really shown out so far and that you're really impressed by? Now let's start with the guys that I think have been really improving their stock so far in Steelers training camp, starting with the newly signed inside linebacker, Kwon Alexander. Now, Kwon's somebody that's coming in, is probably going to be more of a rotational piece to start, but man, he played quite a bit in that first preseason game against the Buccaneers, and he laid down the thunder, man. He is somebody that's not afraid to hit hard. That's exactly what the Pittsburgh Steelers are looking for, especially at that position. And I think he's starting to work his way up the depth chart. He could potentially even be a starter by the time week 1 rolls around. And then another player that I think is really starting to impress and really starting to come into his own is first-round rookie left tackle Broderick Jones. Had yet another great day at practice in Latrobe, where he went up against Nick Herbig multiple times. Nick Herbig has been the star rookie in camp to this point, somebody that's consistently getting after the quarterback. And Broderick and Herbig are getting a nice little rivalry going in camp right now, where Broderick is consistently winning versus Herbig, which is something you definitely want to see from a fellow rookie there in Broderick Jones, who you're hoping can be the left tackle for this franchise moving forward. And I think that that's one of those situations where iron is definitely sharpening iron. Going up against a guy like Nick Herbig, who's got great get-off, has great finesse, knows how to use his hands and use his arms to get past tackles at the National Football League level. He's already proven that. The fact that Broderick is doing a pretty decent job holding him up in practice is definitely a good sign, and he's definitely trending in the right direction at this point. Then someone else on the other side of the defensive line. Now, Isaiah Loudermilk is somebody that has been on the Steelers roster before, right? He's been somebody that's impressed before, but now he's really starting to come into his own with Larry Ogunjobi dealing with an injury. Loudermilk is starting to step up a little bit, and he is playing very good football. And it definitely seems like at this point, Isaiah is a roster lock, and it's looking like he could even carve himself out a role here on this Steelers defense, which is exactly what you want to see. DeMarvin Leal might be somebody that's falling a little bit right now on the defensive line, and Isaiah Loudermilk is somebody that's very versatile. They've been playing him at edge in their nickel packages at times. They're playing him at 3 technique. They're playing him at 5 technique. Just about everything other than true outside linebacker and nose tackle. That's the stuff that Isaiah Loudermilk can do, and that's what he's been doing for the defense so far, and he's thriving in that role. And then another rookie whose stock is up is Spencer Anderson. Now, it's just slightly up in my opinion, because before he wasn't getting much reps at center, but today in Latrobe at Steelers training camp practice, first day getting reps with the center or at the center position, was a bit shaky. Right, he wasn't fantastic, But with Kendrick Green starting to struggle a little bit at the center position, it seems like they're trying to exhaust every single possibility at that position, and Spencer Anderson is certainly somebody that could fill that role. Now, if you had to pick one player to be your backup center here, who is it going to be? Is it going to be Kendrick Green? Give me a KG. Or if it's going to be Spencer Anderson, the rookie out of Maryland, 7th-round pick, give me an SA down there in the comment section. This is going to be the pinned comment on today's show. So whenever YouTube throws you an ad break here in just a couple of seconds, take advantage of that time by answering today's pinned question. Now, another guy that I think is on the rise is slot cornerback Elijah Riley, who had another interception today against Mason Rudolph, and somebody that just continues to make plays. And right now, Chandon Sullivan is doing fine at slot corner, but he's not making those big splash plays like Elijah Riley is. I think Elijah, being a former safety, is a really good run defender, which is something that Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin really do value in that slot cornerback position. And I think it's not crazy to think whatsoever that Elijah could be the Steelers' starting slot corner week 1 when they play the 49ers at Acrisure Stadium. Then another guy that I am really digging right now, I went through the All-22 film a couple of nights ago, and somebody that stood out to me was Dylan Cook, the offensive tackle. He usually played on the right side opposite of Broderick Jones, who played pretty much the entire game. But Dylan Cook looked really, really good in his time on the field, and he's continuing to impress in practice. He's got really good foot speed. He's actually a really good athlete. And right now, LaRaven Clark is above him on the Steelers depth chart, but don't be surprised whatsoever if Dylan Cook is a surprise addition to this 53-man roster as a 4th offensive tackle. He's been impressive to this point in camp. Then another guy whose stock is rising is Luke Barku because he's really good in coverage. And right now, Madre Harper is kind of struggling in coverage. James Pierre is very on and off in coverage at this point. Chris Wilcox is struggling in coverage. But Luke Barku, although he has a little bit of a tackling issue, which could show its ugly head in the screen and run game, he's been really solid in pass coverage, which is exactly what you want to see. And exactly if you have to pick one thing, bad tackling or bad coverage from a corner, you're picking the bad tackling. And right now, that's Barku's kind of situation. If he tightens up the tackling, I think he's going to end up making this final 53-man roster. Then another guy whose stock is definitely up after that Tampa Bay Buccaneers preseason game is Trenton Thompson, the newly signed safety who had an interception on Friday night, and he's been overall pretty impressive in practice. Now, the safety room is pretty deep right now with Trey Norwood getting back to practice today and Kenny Robinson showing out a little bit in practice throughout training camp. And, of course, you got Miles Killebrew, DeMonte KZ, Keanu Neal, and Minka Fitzpatrick as your number 1 guy. It's going to be tough for Trenton to end up making this final roster, but he is starting to impress down there in Latrobe. Now, coming up here, I got 3 Steelers players whose stocks are starting to fall a little bit at Steelers training camp. But before we get into that, let's have a word from our sponsor at BetUS. And these guys are offering you guys a fantastic deal for the NFL preseason here, a 125% deposit bonus when you go to chatsports.com/bet and use promo code Steelers125. Now, what does that mean, Jack, a 125% deposit bonus? That means when you put in a deposit there of $100 to $600, they're going to give you 125% of that dollar amount back to you to use on your bet. So if you put in $100, they're going to give you $125 additional dollars to use on your bets for a total of $225. And you might as well use it on this week's preseason game for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's preseason. It's fun to bet on these things, guys. The games don't really matter for much, so make it matter for something for you. Go ahead right now. Go to chatsports.com/bet and use Steelers125 as the promo code to get that 125% deposit bonus. Now, some players whose stocks are definitely down after last Friday night's preseason game. Number 1, Cody White, the wide receiver. He was already the lowest rung on the wide receiver room when it comes to Miles Boykin, Hakeem Butler, and Cody White. Those are kind of the bubble receivers on the Steelers roster right now. And Cody definitely didn't help himself with his performance. Multiple balls out there that he could have caught that he didn't come down with, unfortunately. And overall, although he's been pretty impressive in practice, you got to do it in the games. You got to do it when the lights are on, and Cody didn't do that last weekend. It's going to be interesting to see if he can bounce back this week for this week's preseason game. And then another guy whose stock is definitely down, I think Tanner Morgan, coming into last preseason game, last Friday, definitely had a shot to assert himself as that third quarterback on this roster. Mason Rudolph hasn't played well in training camp. He didn't play overly fantastic against the Bucs. He did have that one dot bomb type of throw to Calvin Austin III, but other than that, he didn't look fantastic. But Tanner played absolutely awful against the Buccaneers. Hasn't looked really good in practice either. I think at this point, I can say pretty much with certainty, Tanner Morgan will not be on the Steelers' final 53-man roster, which sucks because I like Tanner. You know, he's a good kid, but overall, he's just not talented enough, in my opinion, to be an NFL player, even as a backup. And then another player that, of course, is stock down right now is Kendrick Green. Now, last week, there was a lot of hype going around Kendrick Green for moving over to fullback, and I still think at some point this preseason, we might see Kendrick get a carry as a fullback on like a 4th and 1, 3rd and 1, maybe one at the goal line to get a touchdown. But, you know, at his original primary position, center, he was god-awful in that Friday preseason game against the Bucs. And, you know, right now he's not doing great in practice either, even to the point where they're getting the rookie Spencer Anderson to take some reps at center. So Kendrick is definitely somebody whose stock is down, and right now he is definitely in danger of being cut for the 2023 season. He needs to pick it up big time if he wants to make this final roster. Now, what say you guys? Do you think that Kendrick Green should convert to a full-time fullback? Let me know down there in the comments section by giving me a yes or by giving me a no. For me, I think he should. I think that's his best chance at making the roster because he's been so bad as a center and as a guard throughout his career. Why not try to be like a fridge-type fullback, you know, a big 300-pound fullback that can just get in there and really dominate on 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, at the goal line. I think that's probably the best way that he can provide value to this team. So if I were you, I would put my yes down there in the comments, but let me know what you guys think. Now, before I go, I have some injury updates for the black and gold from Latrobe, starting with the big news from Larry Ogunjobi. Still an undisclosed injury. He's been walking around in a walking boot. He was not at practice today. He showed up for a little bit in his walking boot towards the end of practice. But is his injury a little bit worse than we think? Right? He's in that walking boot right now. He's not doing any team activities. I'm really hoping that Larry O can get back on the field because I think he's a really good 5 technique. And, you know, although Isaiah Loudermilk, I think, is probably capable of filling in for him in his absence, I really hope this isn't a serious injury, and I hope Larry is able to get on the field by week 1 fully healthy because this Steelers defense could really use him on that defensive line. And then we get to another member of the defensive line here. Marcus Golden did not practice today. Maybe Mike Tomlin during his post-practice press conference will say something about this because it's a completely undisclosed injury. We have no idea where he is. But if that news comes out after, just know that we don't have that news now while recording this video. But Marcus is somebody you bring in to try to be that rotational third edge piece in NFL free agency. It's looking like Nick Herbig is starting to move up the ladder there, and he might be that third piece this year. But it's still nice to have that veteran presence out there, and hopefully Marcus is doing okay. And then we have some good news for the black and gold here as we got multiple players that are expected to be in the starting lineup getting back into the fold here. Joey Porter Jr. and Keanu Neal, 2 guys that are expected to play quite a bit for the Steelers this year, full participants after dealing with some injuries. And then Trey Norwood and Keanu Benton, both were limited in practice today. It seems like they are getting on the fast track to getting back into those team periods there in Latrobe. That'll be it for me today, guys. Really do appreciate all the support. If you want to see my practice takeaways and daily practice updates from Latrobe, you got to go follow me on my Steelers-specific Twitter page. Go there right now, at Sperry_Yins. Give me a follow. I post daily updates, practice updates. My daily takeaways go on there. So if you want those daily updates on how the black and gold are doing, you got to go visit me there. And then also make sure you subscribe to Steelers Talk here on YouTube for the best damn Steelers coverage money can buy. And the best thing is it's 100% free. You don't have to spend any of your money here. And we're going to give you premium content every single day. We've got our watch party, or we have our live show tomorrow. We have watch parties coming for all 17 games this year. You're not going to want to miss our great Steelers coverage all year long. And if you want to become an expert on the Pittsburgh Steelers, this is the place for you. All right, that's going to be it from me today, guys. I will see you guys later. And as always, here we go, Steelers.